I personally don't want my trees to get too high. I'd like my trees not to be much higher than my house to protect them from hurricanes, protect them from wind and things like that. And also, I don't want to have to climb a ladder to get fruit. Hello everybody and welcome to Fruitful Trees. And it is right now July 22nd, 2025. We are in mango season and we are coming towards the end of mango season because about mid-August, most of the mangoes are gone. We're into the late season mangoes right now, even though some people are getting an earlier second crop of early season mangoes. So it's interesting this year. But it is time to start thinking about pruning our trees. Because if we want to assure the tree stays healthy and we also get a crop next year, this is a very important thing that people don't understand, the maintenance of the trees. And you need to have goals when you're growing your foods and when you're growing your trees. And my goals, based on my location, I have several different goals than other people, and I want to share them with you today. So hopefully you can get some idea and tips of what will be best for you when you're pruning your trees. Why in the world am I holding this? This is one of my most reliable trees in my yard. This is a cac mango from Vietnam. And this tree here is a early to mid-season mango, and I just pulled off the last 2 or 3 mangoes, and that's when you start thinking about pruning your trees. When you've already pulled the last one off, the sooner you prune from that, the best. So pull the last one and then prune. If you wait too late, definitely after Thanksgiving, this is for South Florida, or earlier would be the best time. After Thanksgiving, you're getting in danger of affecting next year's flowering and fruit producing crop because the tree's going to be recovering. So the earlier you do it, the better. Now, this pole here is very interesting, and I'm going to talk to you about this today. My goal is not necessarily high density, but my situation calls for high density in areas where I planted too close. I personally don't want my trees to get too high. I'd like my trees not to be much higher than my house to protect them from hurricanes, protect them from wind and things like that. And also, I don't want to have to climb a ladder to get fruit. I want to be able to use my picker maybe and just pick fruit. But if it goes way beyond my picker's ability to pick the fruit, to me, that is not a goal I want. If that is your goal, well, then you might have different ways of doing your pruning than I do. But there's 3 things I want you to consider when pruning, okay? So the first thing is, this is my cac tree that I just pruned back. And the first thing is the center. I want to make sure I have an empty center, almost like a wine glass. And if you are going to do that, it's going to let the tree get more wind through it. It's going to produce less disease in the future when diseases are airborne and they get caught up in the middle of the tree. It's also going to allow more sunlight in the tree. So I want to make sure the center is somewhat empty, if not completely empty, and give the tree more of a wine glass type shape. So that's the center. The next thing is the branches that are coming out. The branches that are coming out, I've been to a farm where the branches that came out were extremely long. As a matter of fact, I think they were just as long going sideways as they were with the tree going upward. Now, there's not an issue with that if you have a lot of space. If you're on some big farm and you have a lot of space, 25 feet between each tree or even longer, maybe you can get away with that. Most of us, including myself, we don't have that opportunity to let the branches on the side grow out 10, 15 feet. So we want to make sure we're maintaining the tree where it's not going in too much. And I've heard people say, if you cut the top of the tree, don't cut the sides. And if you cut the sides, don't cut the top. And you want to maintain some of the tree where it was at and not completely cut the tree on every side to assure you're going to get some production the next year. And I trim my trees all different based on the location where they're particularly at, if they're close to another tree or not. This cac tree is right next to my jackfruit tree here, and that I'm not concerned about because that's a papaya tree. But the cac is an extremely vigorous tree that I have to keep an eye on. Now, this branch was coming out to here recently, but I also have to look at the aesthetics of the house and the areas that I utilize in my house, and I didn't want it to overtake completely. So there's another thing I'm going to talk about is the bottom canopy, if we want to make sure we're getting flowers on the bottom or not. But as for this particular tree, we want to look at how far the branches are coming out and where they're coming out, and to consider for the side branches on most trees, only cut one side when it's getting too long, 1 year, and leave the other side to cut it another year. Now, some people do this in quadrants. 1 year they'll cut a quarter of the side, another year they'll cut that quarter, another side that quarter. Some people do it half and half. 1 year they'll cut one side, 1 year they'll cut another side. Again, it depends on where the tree actually is in the situation. But it's not ideal to make the tree skinny all the way around in every situation unless you're doing super high density and you don't have a choice. The chance is much better of your trees producing fruit the next year is if you're only going to tip the ends and not completely prune them back. However, if you do that, they're going to just keep growing, growing, growing. So eventually you're going to have to cut them back. So if you do them in quadrants or in half, you're going to assure you're getting production on the parts you haven't cut that year. So for example, if this year I cut this part back, well, next year I'll cut that part and then that part and that part. So this tree is growing in a tight space, so it hasn't branched out too much. But for now, it was really way out to here, and I cut this back. I'm going to show you some other trees in a moment, some other experiments I made. But now to this. So you want to look at the middle, you want to look at the sides. So there's 4 things: the middle, the side, the height, and then the bottom. So now with the height, how tall do you want to keep your trees? This is one thing I'm really excited about because I see a lot of people with really tall trees, and I don't necessarily see the point of doing that because many of the higher fruits up, the birds are eating. People aren't getting, and you can get a long pole, but my goal is to not to have to climb a ladder to get the fruit. Well, this pole is 10 feet. This is a 10-foot plastic pole. I would like to keep my trees. Now, some trees are dwarfer trees. Some trees are taller trees, so that will make a difference. But with a tree like this, a very vigorous tree like this is a cac mango, this will get out of control. I like to keep my trees at 12 feet. I want to try not to go over 12 feet. This pole is 10 feet. 2 more feet on here, that's a really tall tree. And if you start getting into the 15, 20 feet, not only is it harder to get the mangoes, but you're also talking about hurricane possible damage and when the trees get bigger than the house. So here is a good way to measure this. I just cut this tree back about 2 feet. So its tree's been in the ground now for, maybe 5 or 6 years. And it was getting up there and it needed a cut. This pole is 10 feet. That is about a little bit, I left some spots a little taller, but I don't want to go much bigger than this pole when I trim it, or because there's still need room to grow. The tree has to grow back. So this tree might grow 2 or 3 feet. So if I got a 10-foot pole, it helps me measure how much I need to trim it each year. And some people say, well, you're going to lose all the mangoes up top. I don't care about the mangoes all the way up top. That's not my concern as much as I want them fruiting lower. And that's why you don't want to cut the top and the sides in the ideal situation. Maybe the top and one side or the top and one quadrant, but not always the same situation. Now, we're going to look at the bottom of the tree here, which there's still some room at the bottom to grow to grow fruit, but there could be more. I've seen trees where the fruit is hanging on the floor, and some people don't like that. And I'd rather prop those up and so the mangoes aren't touching the floor than have to go reach all the way up to get some mangoes that I'm going to be competing with animals up there for. However, in my situation, some trees are right in the middle of my yard, and I don't want the bottom to have any bush at all. So I want to be able to walk under those trees because I want to utilize my yard as well. So the situation always matters. But the middle is empty. The top is in the 12-foot range, and dwarf trees are going to be much smaller. They'll just grow slower. You can keep those shorter, but the big trees I want to keep in the 12-foot range. And then the sides, I don't want to cut every side in every single situation. So I'm going to go and look at these other trees because I haven't trimmed them yet. And there are 2 trees I have trimmed back there that are way bigger than this pole for a reason, and I'm going to show you. But I'm hoping these tips will help you. So let me go look at my Sugarloaf and my Sweet Tart and show you that now. Okay, here I am in front of my Sugarloaf and my Sweet Tart tree. Sweet Tart is a wonderful tree. It stays on the skinnier side. But Sweet Tart, the thing is, if you let it get too tall, it's known as a branch breaker. Meaning, this tree, the mangoes will grow in clusters, and this tree will break if it gets too tall when it gets windy. So it's another advantage of not to leave it too high. There are so many mangoes still hanging on this tree. It's an excellent tree, and to be honest, years past I had trouble figuring out when to pick them, so I wasn't as appreciative of this tree as I am now that I know how to pick them. Wonderful tree, doesn't get too wide, but let's look at the space on this. So what's going to happen is, if we see this tree here, how much I have to cut. Let me back up the camera so you can see here more and get a better idea. We'll see the top of it here. So, 10-foot pole, and you see it goes a little bit higher than 10 feet. So what I'm going to do is, after I pull the last mango off, I'm going to cut at 10 feet. So that'll leave it 2 feet to grow. I don't want it to get much bigger than that. As for the width on this tree, it's already a skinny tree. I did cut, there was a branch going way over here, and I cut that because it was getting in the way of this tree, and also it'll break the branch if it's way too much. So I did cut that, but this here is my Sugarloaf tree, which is quite interesting. It was planted later than this one, and it seems to be growing slower, but this one's all the way to the ground. And again, this year I learned how to pick Sugarloaf, which helps. But as this tree grows up, I definitely want to keep these 2 sides trimmed so they don't get too much into each other. So these 2 sides, if I'm going to leave this tree here because they're way too close, but if I'm going to leave them this close, I definitely want to keep these sides trimmed where this has much more of a side to grow. So I'll keep that in mind when I trim it. But this tree has still a way to go, so I'm probably not even going to trim this Sugarloaf this year. But this Sweet Tart definitely going to be trimmed. Now let me show you my lemon meringue trees that I did trim and talk to you about those. Now, because my garden is so dispersed, it's hard to see these trees on a wide lens on a camera. So I don't know if you can see the top of this pole, but this is one of my 2 lemon meringue trees, and this goes way farther in height than I would like it to. I already trimmed this tree back, and I'm at 10 feet, and it's still going up another 5 feet. So this tree is definitely taller than I would like it. However, I didn't know enough about pruning trees when I originally planted this tree, and I have no fruit down here, no bush down here. It's all up top, and I did cut out the middle here, and I left the sides here. So this is much bigger tree than I would like. However, for this particular tree and my goals, in my space in my yard, I want this space because these trees are right in the middle of my yard. And some people say they don't want their yard just completely full where they can't walk in. And that's my case here. So I have these 2 trees that are taller, and I did cut them back. They would be even taller if I didn't. And I cut out the middle, and this year they were both loaded. Now I have another tree right here, another lemon meringue, and this lemon meringue I cut a little bit different. I left the top and I just cut the sides. With this one, I cut the top in the middle and I left it this way. It's more of an experiment to compare the next 2 at the end of this year. But these 2 trees are definitely trees taller than I would like. But because when I originally planted them, I wasn't thinking about the space in the bottom of the tree. That's the problem I have. Also, if you let the trees get too big up top or go too tall, the bottom isn't going to get enough sunlight, and these are going to fall off anyway. These leaves aren't going to produce anyway. So another advantage of keeping your trees smaller is you can grow the bottom of the trees better. If I keep my trees too high, all of these branches are going to fall off on the bottom. So I want to show you my other lemon meringue and then show you two other trees before I prune them so we can see how they look. Okay, this here is my orange tree. And I pruned this back last year and it was loaded this year with fruit and it's so great. So when we come here and we see, that's not bad. I pruned it back last year, shorter than that, and I didn't get much up top this year. But on the sides, I got a ton of fruit. I even pruned the sides and I got a ton of fruit. And so this tree this year, I might just not prune the top because of the size. It looks okay, but I'm very appreciative of all the fruit I got. And there's a perfect orange sherbet fruit right there that I'll have for breakfast. But it's about 12 feet right now. I might prune the top a little, but this tree is excellent in terms of the size. Now the area, it's in a really tight area. The bottom of the tree, I did cut the branches so I could walk under there so I can get to the back to my other trees. And I'm really happy with that tree. Now, here is my other lemon meringue tree. And look, I left that one. I cut the ends off because they were coming out a lot. Now, I should have just cut one side, but I did cut more than one side, so that might affect it next year. But those trees are bigger, but as you see, I have space to walk here now down here, which is under the trees. So this tree here is my M4, and my M4 tree is loaded right now. Again, it's a late season mango, so it's loaded right now. But what I'm going to do is leave the bottom part here because it's towards the back of my yard where I don't need to walk under it. I'll leave the tree here, and definitely I'm going to come and I got my 10-foot pole, and after I pull the last ones off, I'm going to cut the tops of these so they'll grow another 2 or 3 feet until next season. I'll leave the sides here. This is a great example of starting off the tree and leaving it, and just I have the bottom, I have airflow in the middle. This is a great example of how a tree should look in my opinion. And the sides aren't even coming out too long, but if I want to maintain it, I'll bring the sides in. This is M4 and I'm very excited about this tree. There's even one on the floor here. Looks like I'm going to have, and it's ripe. Now, because my yard is so packed with everything, leaving the trees skinnier and letting them grow taller might be to some advantage, but it still defeats the purpose of having trees that are too tall. This tree here is a top work, and this is a top work of my sunrise. Well, it was originally a Duncan that I top worked to sunrise, and it definitely needs to come down a little. And this is the next tree I'm going to cut back up there because I don't want it to get too tall. That's a sunrise. I have other fruit trees as well that I have to cut, which I do every year. And I'll be cutting all these other trees to make them lower. And that just gives you an example of pruning trees. As I prune these trees, I'll show you more of the process. But I could tell you here on this lemon meringue that I'm standing right next to, this branch came all the way out to that tree. So it was, and all the way out this way. So it was fine. It was time to cut it, and I did. And so we have to look at each situation, each yard, and make the cuts accordingly, and hopefully learn each year as we go. But one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to completely cut the whole tree back and affect your next year's crop if you don't have to. Maybe cut half of the tree so you could still get some production the following year. Put your comments or questions below of how you trim your trees and tips that you've learned in your yard and what works for you. Thank you everybody for watching. As I prune these trees, I will make some other videos. Until then, have a great day and keep growing.